Today's briefing by Joint Special Envoy Mr. Kofi Annan. His tasks are very challenging, and I'm grateful for his hard work over the past several weeks. Many of you in this audience have called his efforts the last chance to resolve the Syrian crisis peacefully. Some of you have expressed concern that a full-scale civil war could erupt should diplomacy fail. The stakes are extremely high. Your backing of Mr. Annan's efforts has played a crucial role so far. I urge you to sustain and deepen that support. The Security Council, for its part, has spoken out again in support of Mr. Annan's work. I sincerely hope that this regained sense of unity in the Council will put pressure on all concerned to end the violence and suffering. I ask all members of the international community to rally behind Mr. Annan's efforts, especially in the crucial days ahead. Despite the Syrian government's acceptance of the Joint Special Envoy's plan of initial proposals to resolve the crisis, the violence and assaults in civilian areas have not stopped. The situation on the ground continues to deteriorate. Violence should have stopped months ago. Indeed, it never should have started, particularly since it was unleashed in response to the legitimate demands of the Syrian people, the same demands that people across the Arab world have been making for more than a year now. The death toll is rising each day. The human rights of the Syrian people continue to be gravely violated. Violence is driving thousands to leave their homes in search of safety and protection. People have been victims of horrendous abuse, including sexual violence. Humanitarian needs are growing dramatically. Over 1 million Syrians need humanitarian assistance inside the country. Tens of thousands are seeking refuge in neighboring countries, which have shown exceptional hospitality. The United Nations has started to mobilize assistance and has delivered help to 2,000 families in need inside Syria. We need to do more, and we will work with all stakeholders to ensure that the Syrian people are not left alone at this critical time. As relief efforts expand, it will remain essential to preserve the independence and impartiality of humanitarian assistance. Cities, towns, and villages have been turned into war zones. The sources of violence are proliferating. This is simply unacceptable and must stop immediately. The further militarization of the conflict is not a solution. I appeal to President Assad, his government, and all concerned to show vision and leadership and to do what is right for the Syrian people. I urge the opposition to be ready to cease all violence as well as Mr. Annan's plan outlines. Beyond the cessation of violence, it is critical to move fast on the political process. A pause in hostilities will not hold without a political horizon. In this regard, the Syrian opposition is taking steps to present itself as a coherent body. This will be important for dialogue. I hope we can launch an inclusive and genuine process very soon. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the future of Syria belongs to the Syrian people. We must do our utmost to safeguard their welfare and uphold their universal rights. We are providing all possible support, including for Mr. Annan's mission and through the UN technical team on the ground in Damascus today. Our actions must continue to be based on our strong commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria, and to the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter. Our priority must be to promote a Syrian-led political transition to a democratic, plural political system in which citizens are equal regardless of their affiliations, ethnicities, or beliefs. It is a responsibility now of the Syrian authorities to deliver on what they have promised and to implement fully and unconditionally all the commitments they have given to Joint Special Envoy Mr. Annan. The continued support of the General Assembly for the efforts of the Joint Special Envoy remains vital at this critical time. I count on you for this. The Syrian people deserve freedom, justice, prosperity, and peace. Let us be united and determined in helping them to realize those goals. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General of the United Nations. I now invite the Joint Special Envoy of the United Nations and the League of Arab States, His Excellency Kofi Annan, to address the meeting.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, thank you for the invitation to brief the General Assembly on my mission as Joint Special Envoy of the United Nations and the League of Arab States on Syria. Your resolution of 21 February 2012 was a turning point in the international response to the crisis in Syria. You came together to express the deep concern of the international community at the situation in Syria. Following your resolution, Secretaries General Ban and El Arabi invited me to be their joint special envoy. I thank both of them for their constant support and encouragement. I am guided by the General Assembly resolution and the resolutions of the Arab League. I appreciate the Security Council's support for my mission and the six-point plan in its presidential statement of 21st March, and I welcome the Council's statement this morning. This unity will be crucial as we move ahead. The Secretary General has spoken clearly about the unacceptable situation in Syria. As he has stressed, there is an urgent need to stop the killing, the abuses, and bring humanitarian relief to a suffering population. We must also move quickly to facilitate a peaceful Syrian-led, inclusive political solution that meets the democratic aspirations of the Syrian people. This should be achieved through a comprehensive political dialogue between the Syrian government and the whole spectrum of Syrian opposition. A broad cross-section of Syrian society must be involved. As we pursue these endeavors, we do so committed to respect Syria's sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity, and the UN Charter. We wish to ensure that the Syrian people's aspirations are realized and that they shape their own future. Mr. President, after several weeks of engagement, including my discussion with President Assad on the 10th and 11th of March in Damascus, on 25th of March, the Syrian government confirmed its acceptance of the plan. I registered this acceptance in a letter of 27 March. I regarded this as an important initial step in cooperation and stressed that action must follow. The essence of the six-point plan is as follows. First, there must be an inclusive Syrian-led process to address the legitimate aspirations and concerns of the Syrian people. In this regard, President Assad committed to appoint an empowered interlocutor for such a process when invited to do so. Second, the Syrian government committed to cease troop movements towards population centers, not to use heavy weapons in population centers, and begin to pull back of the military concentrations in and around population centers. The government also committed to work with me to bring about a sustained cessation of armed violence in all its forms by all parties. As the government implements its obligations, I will seek a commitment from the opposition to bring about a sustained cessation of armed violence. It is agreed that this would require an effective UN supervision mechanism. Third, the government committed to ensure timely provision of humanitarian assistance to all areas affected by the fighting, and to an immediate 2-hour humanitarian pause coordinated on the ground. Fourth, with respect to all persons detained arbitrarily owing to the recent incidents, the government committed to provide without delay full access to all places in which such persons are being detained and to release such persons working closely with the International Committee of the Red Cross. Fifth, the government committed to ensure freedom of movement throughout the country for journalists and to grant visas for them in accordance with Syrian regulations. Sixth, the government committed to respect freedom of association and the right to demonstrate peacefully as legally guaranteed. Mr. President, all points of the plan are crucial, but one is most urgent: the need for cessation of violence. Clearly, the violence is still continuing. Alarming levels of casualties and other abuses continue to be reported daily. Military operations in civilian population centers have not stopped. For its part, the government has written to me stating that armed groups continue to assault and attack government forces, civilians, and property. However, on 1 April, the Syrian government informed me that a plan for withdrawing military units from populated zones and surrounding areas have been established and would be in effect until 10 April. I was also informed that instructions have been issued that no new military forces are to be deployed to these zones. The government has informed me of partial withdrawals from 3 locations: Idlib, Zabadani, and Deraa. I await further action and fuller information. The government has indicated that it will continue to update me on steps it is taking, but it is clear that more far-reaching action is urgently required. Immediate and verifiable steps are needed to complete implementation of commitments in the crucial days ahead. We are increasing our efforts to have an objective understanding of what is happening on the ground and who is doing what, and I would welcome support in this endeavor from those with influence and capacity. In the end, this is not merely a technical issue. As I have indicated to the Syrian authorities, these steps must be implemented in a way that sends a powerful political signal of peace. Mr. President, I have urged the government to complete implementation of its commitments so that we can move to a full cessation of armed violence in all its forms by all parties within 48 hours thereafter. We must silence the tanks, helicopters, mortars, guns, and stop all other forms of violence too: sexual abuse, torture, executions, abductions, destruction of homes, forced displacement, and other abuses, including on children. We have explained to the opposition the immediate steps demanded of them if the government implements its obligations. All interlocutors with whom we have spoken have committed to call for cessation of violence once the Syrian government has demonstrably fulfilled its commitments regarding use of heavy weapons and troop withdrawals. They have also expressed their readiness to work with the UN mission. We continue to engage the opposition on this issue, and I urge governments with influence to impress upon them that they must cease all acts of violence as well. Accordingly, upon completion by the government of its commitments by Tuesday, 10 April, all parties should move immediately to cease all forms of violence so that a complete cessation is in place by 0600 hours, Damascus time on Thursday, April 12, 6 o'clock in the morning, Damascus time on April 12. I urge the government and the opposition commanders to issue clear instructions so that the message reaches across the country, down to the fighter and soldier at the local level. Mr. President, I continue to press for action on other items of the plan, including on detainees, journalists, and allowing peaceful protest. The government has informed me that certain steps are underway, including the issuance of 21 visas to European, Russian, American, and Korean journalists since the 25th of March. I have also been informed that plans for release of detainees are being made and will be implemented within a few weeks of the agreement. However, I await further steps and fuller information and a comprehensive report on all actions planned and taken. The 6-point plan needs to be implemented in its entirety and urgently. 1 million people need humanitarian assistance in Syria, including internally displaced persons. There are tens of thousands of refugees now outside the country. The humanitarian effort is being pursued independently and impartially. I have stressed to the Syrian government the importance of working with the Emergency Relief Coordinator to ensure needs in the country are met. Action is needed to allow greater humanitarian capacity in the country. Mr. President, the Security Council has expressed today its full support for an effective UN supervision of a sustained cessation of armed violence and its readiness to consider proposals and authorize a mission should circumstances permit. The Syrian government has committed to accept such a mission. Opposition groups are expressing their readiness to cooperate. The conflicting assessments of the situation on the ground, as well as the inevitable difficulties that will arise on the ground in sustaining a cessation of violence, underscore the importance of a UN mission. As agreed with the Syrian authorities, a UN team, including officers from the Department of Peacekeeping Operations, led by Major General Robert Mood of Norway, has arrived in Syria today to start technical preparations for the potential deployment of observers to monitor a cessation of armed violence and the full implementation of the 6-point plan. As we prepare for such a mission, we need to keep the unique character of the Syrian crisis in mind. The violence in Syria cannot be addressed through the means of a traditional observer mission interposed between two armies. The situation is fluid. There is no established front line. Peace will not be consolidated without credible political process. What we would need on the ground is a small, nimble United Nations presence. It would need to be deployed quickly with a broad and flexible mandate. Its freedom of movement throughout the country and security must be assured. It should engage all relevant parties. It should constantly and rapidly observe, establish, and assess facts and conditions on the ground in an objective manner. Mr. President, a cessation of violence is an important beginning, but we must move quickly forward on a political process to meet the aspirations of the Syrian people. We must commence a comprehensive political dialogue between the Syrian government and the whole spectrum of the Syrian opposition. This must enable a Syrian-led political transition to a democratic, plural political system in which citizens are equal regardless of their affiliations or ethnicities or beliefs. It will be vital that the opposition can engage effectively in such a process, and I continue to place high priority on engaging them. Progress has been made on improving inclusivity and method of work within the Syrian opposition, though more needs to be done. Mr. President, I am acutely aware of the grave situation on the ground. I am impatient for action and commitments made. I hope both government and opposition understand what is at stake and seize this moment. Let us stop the killing and start serious political dialogue for the well-being of the Syrian people. In this regard, our collective effort will be critical. I ask those states with influence on the parties to use it now to help bring about a cessation of violence and support implementation of the six-point plan in all its aspects. The unity of the international community behind one mediation effort offers the best chance to end the violence and help Syria steer its own course to a peaceful and democratic future. Let me conclude by saying that the transformational winds blowing today cannot be resisted, at least not for long. The only answer is leaders to embrace change and reform. Thank you.
I thank the Joint Special Envoy for his briefing. I should like to remind the delegate